let's talk about movies. You briefly mentioned Interstellar. You can talk about that also, but in any other movie that has left an impression on you.
Yeah, no, a lot of movies, right? I think Interstellar is something that I think probably going to remain my favorite movie. For the life. Uh, I like comedy movies, so pick any comedy movies. I thoroughly enjoy them. Uh, brings lighter side of life, which is what all we need. Uh, I think one movie, because we talked so much about leadership. Uh, I think the one movie that I'm blinking on the name of the movie, but it is about the story of how Nelson Mandela inspired the team of South African rugby and
Invictus.
Invictus uh, to win the World Cup hosted by them in a bid to unite
The country.
the country. That movie, in many way, is probably one of the best example of leadership displayed at multiple levels. So, because we're talking about so much about leadership in this, talk, I think that's a movie that I think fits
Sure.
as one of my favorite movies as well. Incredible storytelling, incredible story itself to begin with.
What a great human moment.
Exactly, and incredible acting from Morgan
For sure.
Freeman, Matt Damon. If you hear Matt Damon's some of the podcasts about how much he had to work on his South African accent, for
Accent, yeah.
example. So the craft, you talk about growth mindset. Actors are some of the best exhibitors of growth mindset, as they have to learn new things for every new movie. So showing that, uh, just power of music, power of how a national leader can uh, unite two quarreling factions,
Yeah.
and potentially put the nation on a path of progress. How you can inspire millions of kids, with just one brilliant stroke of, having your team travel around the country, and whatnot. I mean, you can go on and on. So it's
Yeah,
one of my
yeah,
favorite
yeah.
movies for so many reasons. For the story, for the storytelling, for the craft that everybody displayed in that movie. And I think if you have not watched, if anybody's not watched, I think they should
Please.
definitely go and watch it. I think you will not be disappointed.
So, since we're talking about Invictus, and you would know that I have a great love for poetry, and one poem that has stayed with me all these years was a poem I discovered in that movie. Is I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. And the whole poem is there on my desk, and just how it gave Nelson Mandela power and faith and motivation to live through the 27 years that he lived. Sometimes when I am feeling low and down, that's the poem that I go back to.
Absolutely.
So, but yeah.
Well, I think, like I said, I think it's difficult to pick one or two or three movies. There's so many. If you talk about if you talk about TV shows, I mean, one of
Sure.
my all time favorite is Breaking Bad. Again, the story, the storytelling, the craft that everybody displays. Again, it's the story of, in many ways, underdog.
True.
Although, in this case, not necessarily a role model, but still story of an underdog winning against all odds, only to eventually accept his own flaws,
Yeah.
and eventually bringing the good side of him to help his accomplice, live the life. I mean, it's an incredible show. It's an incredible, way of, storytelling across 6-7 seasons.
True.
So unlike a movie that can be over in like 3 4 6 months, and you can just have a moment of brilliance or just months of brilliance, and you just create something so so incredible. In this case, the director, the actors had to do this consecutively for 6-7 years, and still it's just incredible, right? I mean, some of the similar to that, some of the most iconic, sitcoms. You think about Seinfeld, or The Office, for example. Like those are my favorites because, again, brings a lighter side and keeps you hooked on those things.
And since we're talking about Breaking Bad, and my next question was going to be about the books that you have read and you have liked. You told me about the book that you were reading or listening to recently was A Life in Parts.
By Bryan Cranston.
Bryan Cranston.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that book is, for me, it's very, very interesting because Bryan Cranston does not portray himself as some larger than life character in his book. He portrays himself as this flawed individual with his own share of failures, setbacks, shortcomings, lack of skills, lack of family, in many ways, and yet continuously displays this one thing that I very, very highly admire, which is the spirit of never giving up on your goals. And how he also learns from his own father, who also happened to be a struggling actor throughout his life, which led to dysfunctional family, and he learned from that. And from when in his own life, Bryan Cranston adopts the never give up spirit, but remains pragmatic by continuously auditioning for small roles to keep the family going, and eventually continuously working on his craft, being pragmatic, listening to sometimes directors' poor advice on how to portray a character because he needs to just get to the next gig, but eventually becoming who he became, multiple time Emmy winning, award winning actor, shows that when you look at the life, on in a bigger scheme of things over a period of 4, 5, 6 decades, you don't have to feel sad or happy in the moment as long as you have a plan for next day, the next month, the next year. And I think I really have thoroughly enjoyed the book. Again, I would highly recommend people reading the book. Because it's about a common man becoming somewhat uncommon. Other book that I probably would like to mention is the Nelson Mandela's autobiography. We briefly talked about that. I think again,
A Long Walk to Freedom.
A Long Walk to Freedom. Very long book if you were to read that or listen to it, but incredibly inspiring book. And the fact that how do you not allow anyone to take over your mental peace, resolve, strength after being incarcerated for 27 years in a small cell.
Yeah.
And you and I both have visited that place on Robben Island.
Yeah.
You can't. I mean, it gives me goosebumps today. But just being able to remain, what I said a few minutes back about optimistic,
True.
not being shackled to the pessimism, but being unshackled from that, saying, someday I will be out of this cell. Someday I'll give this country freedom. And then have the generosity to forgive
them.
the people who gave all the grief to him. I think that book is incredible. Probably as good as any other book that you can read of a freedom fighter. So that's another favorite book of mine.
Any other noteworthy books?
I think there's a book called Good to Great it's a business book. If you guys read that, it's from Jim Collins.
Yeah.
Difficult book to read, but if you read the book, understand, I mentioned very early on that, people are satisfied with doing good, but you got to do great. And what it takes to do great, in terms of corporate world, he talks about that. There are a couple of, I think there's a couple of editions after that also that Jim Collins came out with. So it's another book that I think is probably left a lot of impression on me early on in my life. I talked about John Maxwell's books about leadership has really played a big role. The Straight from the Gut is the autobiography of the GE CEO that I talked about early on. Again, great read. You can even read. So one of my favorite genre in terms of books are autobiographies because they are, just very inspirational. But if you talk about sort of fictional, then Kite Runner, is incredible book. Again, story of an underdog, like how
True.
The small boy from Afghanistan, becomes who he eventually becomes. So, I can go on and on. I think if I have free time, I just want to pick up a book, read it, or listen to a book, because there's so many stories out there that I think we can live thousands of lifetimes, and we still can't get even 1% to it of it. So we can go on and on in that case.
So, do you credit a lot of your knowledge and wisdom to books?
I do. I think books give me perspective that there is life beyond what I already know from where I grew up. Books gave me
That window?
window to that world that exists beyond the boundaries of my house, my city, my state. So, and then I took it upon myself to build the bridge to those places that I was unaware of. So yes, books have played a big role in my life, and I think nowadays books are being replaced by video logs and podcasts and audiobooks and whatnot. So whatever that new medium is, including TikTok videos and Instagram Reels also, right? Whatever the medium is, I think if you are willing to invest in yourself to learn something new, I think that's how you grow.
Yeah.
And that's what to a large extent I have been able to
Has
do.
it ever happened while you are reading a book or while you're listening to an audiobook? Has it ever happened that it was a wow moment and you were like, okay, I need to take some time off to process this. This was something great.
I think probably many times. I don't remember specifically a lot of moments, but I think obviously I remember we briefly talked about this A Long Walk to Freedom, and especially the moment where Mandela talks about he is walking out of that prison after 27 years, and sort of in the moment he decides to forgive if I can say predators, the people who give punishment to him, and a few pages before that moment where he finally finds out that he was being freed after 27 years, and that's the triumph of his belief that the win of good over evil will happen. I mean, those moments still gives me goosebumps. I mean, there are every book has a moment like that, right? That you feel, very very closely connected. So, yeah, and I think if I can say one more thing about a book. I mean, you talked about early on about connecting the dots.
Yeah.
About Steve Jobs or my life. I mean, I'm no one, but if you listen to this book from Bryan Cranston, and he became famous thanks to Breaking Bad in his 50s.
Yeah.
But interestingly, he played a role of a small villain in an X-File episode, which was written and directed by Vince Gilligan about 15 years before that.
Wow.
That's how he had met that guy. And if he had not auditioned for that role, he would have never met Vince Gilligan. And Vince Gilligan would have never casted Bryan Cranston. That's how life dots are connected.
Wow,
that's why you have to take every single chance that you are given.
Yeah.
And you find your way from there. So again, when I listen to that part of the story, it gave me goosebumps because again, sometimes we don't, like, as Bryan Cranston says, people don't want to audition
Yeah.
because we don't want to just become known for the guy who has time to audition, which means he doesn't have the job or the work. But he never stopped. And that's how he got that one small role in an X-File episode, which led to Vince Gilligan casting him
In Breaking Bad.
in Breaking Bad.
And rest is history.
And the rest is history.